Hey guys, my name's Sam. Welcome to Prep Medic. This week's video, we have Temujin here. Temujin is a physician, he is a bushcrafter, and a finalist on a loan. So today, he's gonna be going through a couple different emergency shelters that you can build if you find yourself lost in the wilderness in need of something to protect yourself. So shelter is obviously super important in any kind of survival situation, and unfortunately we don't always know when we're going to be in a survival situation and can't pack our nice fancy tent. So in one of our previous videos we talked about some of the gear recommendations, and you're going to go through some shelters we can do with that gear if we're out for just a day hike with kind of a minimal pack loadout, right?
Absolutely. So the whole goal for today is to give you an idea of two shelters that are really simple that you can pre-deploy. So rig up a ridgeline that is ready to go. So as soon as you know that the weather's changing or that you're lost and you're spending the night, or if you have someone that you're evaluating, what's the two best shelters to build for step one of the evaluation and step two to retain as much heat as possible?
So with these shelters, what is the equipment that we need to make them to start?
So to start, what you'll need is a tarp. I like sil nylon because it's really lightweight. This is 12 feet by 10 feet, I believe, and you'll need rope. So I like doing paracord for my ridgeline, and then I like using a smaller nylon thread just for the anchors. So both combined are fairly lightweight. So most people recommend about 50 feet of paracord. I take about 6 strands of my height and call that good, and typically it's exactly what I need. And then I carry that little bit of nylon in for the corners.
Cool. So with these shelters, we can also make these variations with like a Mylar blanket, one of those really tiny survival shelters if we're going super lightweight, right?
Absolutely. So one of the benefits of having a Mylar tarp that's better than just your first aid Mylar blanket is that it doesn't rip. Mylar blankets are notorious, especially in the backcountry. If you're walking through or using it as a shelter, it just takes one tiny puncture to rip that thing like a newspaper. So I much rather, if I'm going to carry a Mylar something for shelter, a Mylar tarp. They're pretty affordable, 20, 30 bucks on Amazon. And in addition to that, it reflects 80 to 90% of your own body heat. So it has a waterproof side and a reflective side, and that's pretty much my go-to for just your everyday hike, possibly an overnight.
So with all of that preamble out of the way, what are the two shelters we're building and how do we go about doing it?
So the two shelters we're building today is number one, the standard A-frame, and number two, the arrowhead formation. So both of those are really helpful.
So talk me through the steps on the A-frame, because we can kind of modify the A-frame into the arrowhead that you see behind us, but how do we go about selecting a site for the shelter and start building it?
So you want to be looking for locations that are, number one, covered. So is there wooded areas around you, or is it just barren? Are you on the top of a mountain with a bunch of exposure to the wind? Are you close to a large body of water that again has a lot of wind? So you want your environment to do the majority of the work for you, and then place your shelter in a location that's favorable. So once you have that natural windbreak, next you're looking for different resources. All you need for a lot of these shelters is 1, maybe 2 trees, and that's it. And after that, do you have things around you that you can use for fire material? And we have ample fire material over here. So once that shelter is up and your patient's stable, in this formation, you put a fire right where we're sitting right here, and that'll reflect into the shelter and keep everyone warm.
Excellent. So we've got the 2 trees. What's the next step in building it?
So next step in building it, you have the 2 trees, you put your ridge line up for the A-frame, and then you basically blanket it on top and secure the 4 points. So really simple, not too technical at all.
For the A-frame tent, you were talking about that being better for like patient assessment. So if I'm hiking with Buddy, they get hurt, I might set this one up initially just so I can have kind of a 360 view of my patient. I can walk around. I can even like just get things set up in camp and don't have to, be crawling under things the entire time and exerting myself, right?
Absolutely.
So now that converts to what we see behind us, which is the Arrowhead. Talk me through like what are the advantages of this over the A-frame?
So arrowheads are really useful to retain as much heat as possible, and especially if you're using a fire as your added warmth factor. So one thing you need to notice is where the wind is blowing. So the wind isn't blowing from up there to here. The wind I felt was blowing from down there up the mountain. So that's why we have our butt down. So when the wind pushes on our back, it goes over the tarp and doesn't affect us in any way whatsoever. So in addition to that, what you do is you bring that chest high ridge line, one of the angles down. So you have the butt down, and then you put the flaps on the inside. Now you can secure the flaps with rope, and you can use little anchor points with stakes and all that. But quite simply, if you have materials around, like we have already pre-cut logs over here because this is like a lumbered area, or rocks that we can pick up, you put that on the inside of your tarp and line it kind of like an arrow. And that way, any of the wind that's hitting it doesn't affect the shape of it, because you want your tarp to be as taut as possible. If rain is allowed to pool on any which area, that supposedly waterproof tarp becomes less waterproof and you'll have some drippage there.
Really quick, we're gonna go through 5 of the knots you should know to build this shelter. Just really good information to have. Obviously, you can use different knots if something else worked for you, but these are kind of what you have found work the best in your survival practice, correct?
Yeah, so I like to categorize my knots as quick release, tightening kind of knots, and also knots that are secure. So today we're gonna learn at knots that are quick release, so we can adjust our shelter really quickly. And number 2, tightening types of knots, so trucker's hitch and prusik knots. So the next knot that I'm gonna teach you is the ridgeline knot. So this is the first knot that I make onto the scene. So to secure this, I want to make a quick release knot. So quite simply, just like you're tying your shoe, you go around the tree and a regular knot. So whether it's under or over, you pick, because that's not the really important one. The next one, you kind of wrap around. So you're wrapping around this ridge line, and then you push this guy. So whichever way you wrap around, whether that's under or over, when you come around, you push the tail end through this, and you just make a little loop like that. So you pull that, and then it's just that first shoelace type of knot. So again, whether that's over or under, you're going around and then pushing a little loop through that to make that. Now that's pretty secure. That's not going to go anywhere. But to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, because let's say if this was longer and you're walking around, what can happen is this can catch your gear, the little frills or whatnot, and then that goes and your whole ridge line goes. So to secure that, what I do is I just put a little stick in there. So just like that, and I tighten it down. So that way I can pull on it all I want, and that's not going anywhere, and people can mess around with this guy, that's not going anywhere. But as soon as we have to get out of here, or if I have to change this, I pull this guy, pull the rope, and we're gone. So that's one of the quick release knots that I love doing because it's really simple, doesn't take a lot of practice to master. The next one that I really like is, again, similar to the prusik knot. We're taking a piece of rope, bending it like that, and just doing a simple overhand to make a loop. So I'm making a loop like that, all right? This loop goes around the tree. You take up the slack on this end. So you're holding the loop like that, going around, taking the slack up. And again, this isn't going anywhere, but you need something to anchor it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my little stick, I drop down over here, put it in this loop, and tighten that. And again, that's not going anywhere, because to break a thumb thick stick, that takes a lot of force. Just make sure you're not using anything rotten because that might break. So this is fine. And now your first point of contact is ready to go. And if you need to, when you're getting out of here, again, pull the stick and you're gone. So the next knot we're gonna learn is how to tie and tension the anchor point. So quite simply, this is the tail end of your ridge line. You wanna see where that ridge line is tight, and you're going right clockwise. So you take this, you're making a loop just like that, and you're doing it a second time. So at the end of it, you'll kind of have this loop that looks like that. You can see that. So again, twisting it once, twisting it twice, and then you're grabbing on the tail end, so towards the tree, to make a little loop. So let's do that again. So loop once, loop twice, grabbing towards the tree. So you're grabbing it like that. You're making a loop, all right? So hold on to this guy because we're gonna wrap around the tree. And then grab that. Make sure you're at the right level that you like. And as this tightens up, what you can do is you put your tail through this loop and it becomes a hitch. So you can tighten that, like that. Whatever tightness is good for you. So I'm gonna call that good. And as you're going over here, I'm gonna wrap around once, twice, and that allows me to give me some breathing room, because as you're fumbling, as your dexterity gets a little bit worse, it'll be harder to manage. So if I have 2 loops around, then I can tie a knot. So I'll just tie, again, a quick release knot. So going up or under, and just pushing the tail end to make a loop over here. So you're making your loop over here, and again, stick into the loop, make that tight, and then you got a good situation. All right, so we're gonna first learn the pressing knot, which is what I use on my ridge line. And once this is done, I would recommend seeing how this fits on your tarp and just leaving it there so you can quickly put it up when you need to. So you got one string like this, bring them together, just an overhand knot like that, put it in the loop, and what you're doing is you're just making like that. So it's just one simple knot. And what you can do is you just put it over like this, and this knot goes over and over. And just notice that I'm not moving this at all. So as it's going through the loop, it's going on the middle side. The more rounds you go, the better the friction is gonna be, because it's gonna grab onto this rope. Even better, if you have a different gauge or a smaller rope, it's gonna bite down even heavier. So let's do 4 or 5 and call that good. Make sure it sits all nice. And then, as you know, you can move this very freely, but as soon as you apply some pressure, I can use all my weight and it's not gonna give. Really good knot to know, because you can use it for mechanical advantage as well if you need to. So this just goes through your little eyelet on your tarp. And quite simply, you put that little knot again through the loop over here, and then you secure that just with a stick. So it's secure, you can tighten it, and if you need to, loosen it. If you need to go, pull the stick out. This comes out like that. And this stays on your ridge line in case you need to redo it in another location. And this is ready to pack, all right? So through the eyelet, through the loop again, and you're just putting a stick and tightening this guy up. There you go.
Obviously, this is a really quick rundown of 2 possibilities. I mean, the number of shelters you can create in a survival situation is
Innumerous.
There's so many different takes on it, different opinions. So these are 2 great options, tried and true. But if you have something that works for you, by all means, do that. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and we will see you next week.